Hey, welcome to episode 264 of Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for pressing play. This episode, we are joined by Allan T. Grohe Jr., aka Grodog. So he joins us to talk about the AD&D retro clone OSRIC, that's OSRIC, with which he was instrumental in helping get going. The OSR itself, his publishing company, Black Blade Publishing, and RPG goodness in general. And listen, if the whole discussion's great. Allan has been around in a lot of different parts of the RPG hobby, both as a fan and as a creator and a publisher. The whole discussion's great, but if you're basically just here for the OSR and OSRIC part, jump to about an hour in. Again, it's all good. But if you're like, I just want the OSRIC and OSR, jump ahead about an hour. So we also talk about that Allan loves him some Greyhawk. Talk about the skills he learned tracking down early information on Greyhawk and how that helped him get his non-RPG career, his main non-RPG career in knowledge management. How active is the current AD&D 1E and or OSRIC scene? What is Allan's definition of OSR? Does he feel the OSR is important? The legal importance of OSRIC to the OSR community. Zines are often lauded, but at one time, Dragon Magazine was a sort of quote-unquote D&D website in its day as well. Watching an RPG project happen behind the scenes, you can throw your tomatoes now, offer a mild defense of rules lawyers. Talk about vanilla fantasy not being a derogatory term. We also talk a little bit about Cthulhu and Delta Green. And I just say, look, just hit Cthulhu with a boat. Talk about why in the podcast. I've also figured out Lovecraft's indescribable color that comes up a lot. You'll have to, again, listen to the podcast for that. And also we include the Thunderdome match, Strongheart versus Warduke. All that and more in this episode. Hope you enjoy it. Also, don't forget our previous episode, 263, was with Skeeter Green, small RPG publisher, Skeeter Green of Skeeter Green Productions, and we talk about his Valley Out of Time RPG module, and also just small RPG publisher tips from a seminar that him and Zach Glazer do. So I definitely recommend listening to episode 263. But anyway, with that, on with the show. Let's get going with Allan Grohe Jr. and all of this OSRIC, OSR, and other goodness.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcasts. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. Today I'm joined by Allan Grohe, also known as Allan T. Grohe Jr., also known as Allan, also known as Grodog in quotes. Grodog in quotes. That's his cool internet handle. So, Allan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Shane. Happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. You've really been patient working with me to find a good time, and I appreciate.
I think you've been the patient one.
We've been patient with each other, but folks, today's going to be a great show. Allan is deep in RPG goodness. Let me just give you his bio here, and so here we go. Here's your bio, Allan, that you sent me.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw this out there. Allan T. Grohe Jr. has been playing AD&D and other RPGs since 1977. Allan's first professional gaming publication, More for the Shadowmaster, appeared in White Wolf Magazine number 11 in 1988. He also has contributed to the Unspeakable Oath, Pyramid, Polyhedron, and Dragon Magazine, among others. Allan has worked extensively with Biohazard Games. We've got Blue Planet and Upwind in parentheses there. Pagan Publishing, that'd be Delta Green. Different Worlds Publications. Tadashi Ihara. Did I say that right? Tadashi Ihara?
It's Tadashi, yeah.
Tadashi Ihara. And Pied Piper Publishing, Robert J. Kuntz. Allan co-founded, this is one of the main things that we're going to be talking about on the show today, Black Blade Publishing with John Hirschberger in 2009. I got to ask before I forget, is Black Blade, is that a nod to Stormbringer or Black Razor by any chance?
Oh, it is a total love of Michael Moorcock.
Okay,
Yes.
very cool. All right, so Black Blade Publishing with John Hirschberger. I think most people know that Black Razor is D&D's basically version of Stormbringer, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
So Black Blade Publishing with John Hirschberger in 2009, and that's how we met, through your booth at North Texas RPG Con. But y'all formed Black Blade to publish top quality old school gaming products, including OSRIC, which is another thing we're going to be talking about today. That is an OSR, AD&D retro clone. So we'll be talking about that. Monsters of Myth and Kuntz's The Original Bottle City. Allan's most recent projects are Tales of Peril, The Complete Boinger, and Zareth Stories of John Eric Holmes. The Twisting Stare, a gaming newsletter focused on dungeon design that Allan publishes with Tony Rawson. And Saving Throw, a new OSRIC zine to support Usherwood Publishing's Jim Kramer, who is battling his third round of brain cancer. Well, we're very sad to hear about that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Jim, since I'd written this, has passed.
Okay, I was thinking, all right. Yeah. Are you still doing the Saving Throw zine? Do you want me to leave that in?
Yeah. That's totally good. The Saving Throw zine still provides support to Jim's family.
Okay, excellent.
Through any purchases, we all donated our time and effort for that. So all of it goes 100% to Jim's family, and it's college fund stuff for his kids.
That's amazing, man. That's really good. So Allan's editorial design and development work has contributed to winning one Origins Award. What did you win the award for?
Delta Green.
Delta Green, man. I hear a lot. I've got a buddy who would rather play Delta Green than Call of Cthulhu. So
Delta Green's pretty awesome. Delta
Green is like special forces going after the Cthulhu stuff, right? I've never played it, but I've heard about it. So it's kind of like instead of just waiting to go insane, you're getting to fight back a little bit.
Yeah. And then so the original version of Delta Green was published as a set of supplements for Call of Cthulhu in the 90s, and it grew out of some structural problems that the Pagan Publishing crew saw with sort of running campaigns with Cthulhu. And
one of those being that can you survive long enough for a campaign?
Well, yeah. And then how do you pull people into a game? How do you form a group of Cthulhu players? Because if you're trying to do it with, some historical verisimilitude and kind of, not just hand waving new characters like you do in D&D all the time. It's a little bit more difficult. So it was really a structure to create that way to manage a longer term campaign for the game. So.
Well, plus you get to and I love Cthulhu. I love the idea of it. I've played some. Of course, I love the Cthulhu mythos stories. Although I always have to chuckle. Because Cthulhu is made to be this big bad elder god beyond the stars menace, and I always love in the original Call of Cthulhu short story they just hit him with a boat.
Right. Ramming speed.
But anyway, it does imply that that's not the end of the story. I think they do some sort of ominous statement, but it always just cracks me up that just hit him with a boat and let's go. But anyway. For the very few of you that don't know that are listening, in Cthulhu, you're dealing with stuff way beyond mortal kin. There's no way you can defeat it. The best you can do is solve, or like to do some detective work and maybe delay things, and then eventually you're going to go insane. And if you get into a firefight, it's probably with some cultist or something like that. Like you're not gonna pull your M68 out on or an M60 out on like a Shoggoth or something like that.
Not very effectively. No.
Yeah. So and if Cthulhu shows up, you're done. So another thing that always cracks me up on, like when I see movies about the Cthulhu mythos or Lovecraft, you notice that the indescribable color is always purple. Have you noticed that?
I had not noticed that.
No, it's sort of a pinkish purple, the indescribable color. Go watch these movies every time. So, so Delta Green, you actually get to strap up, lock and load, and fight back a little bit.
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some, so that was the original version of Delta Green, was sort of this set of supplements for Cthulhu. And then they kickstarted it in 2000, I don't know, 16 maybe, into its own standalone RPG, which has some additional interesting mechanics that kind of play upon the idea of that the things that keep you human erode over time as you fight the mythos more and more, and you sort of need to de-invest or burn some of your relationships with people or the quality of the relationship and things like that. So it's a little bit like the mechanics for humanity in Vampire, for example, but a bit less, I don't know, hand wavy, maybe.
Right. Well, I guess what is the famous quote? If you stare into the darkness, you become darkness, or
Yeah.
is it Nietzsche? I'm not sure, but it's basically, if you stare into the abyss, you'll become the abyss. So,
Right.
yeah, but no, I've heard nothing but good stuff about Delta Green. So what was your role with Delta Green?
So my role in Delta Green was actually relatively small. So claiming it as an Origins Award it's not really an overstatement since I'm credited in the book, but I was not as deeply involved in that project as I was with some of the later ones.
You were still on it.
So John Tyne sent me the manuscript for Delta Green before it was going to press, and asked for a 1-week turnaround to go through and edit it. And even not even edit it, but just go through and check it for holes, issues, things that were gaps that were missed, things that didn't quite make sense, stuff like that. So, I'm listed as one of the special contributors or special thanks people on the first version of it. So
that's still cool, though, man. I helped Russ Morrissey, goes by Morris online, Ian World at Ian Publishing with Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, which came out it's been out a few months now. And it basically took 5th Edition and added, not complexity, but a lot of cool options to 5th Edition. And you can run it on its own, or you can run existing 5e stuff with it. And I just said, hey, man, can I be part of this? Because I would love to see how the sausage is made, right? And he graciously allowed me to be part of the project, and I wrote some monsters and spells and magic items. So I got a credit, which is really cool. That's a nice thrill, right?
Yeah.
Yourself credited. But two, I got to see there's a lot of thought and work that goes into an RPG project. I already knew that going in, but much more than I thought. There was a lot of discussion and collaboration and debate on things. And so that was priceless to me to get to see what goes on behind the scenes.
It's very interesting being able to kind of get that behind the scenes look with different groups of people and contributors, because people work in so many different ways. And, and some people may have a very strong idea of how something's going to get done, or a designed vision that's guiding it, and other people may be more collaborative and evolutionary. And
well, this was pretty collaborative, and it was always open to other ideas, but they had a very strong team lead, Mike Myler, who does Vast Cavia and some other stuff of his own. He led the project, and he was really good at wrangling the cats. So, and letting everybody have a say and debate stuff, but also keeping things on track. So it was very interesting. And almost everything was, because the way everybody collaborates online now, almost everything happened on Discord.
Okay.
That was, there was emails and stuff, but Discord was where most of the work happened. All right, and then you won an ENnie award, and you have 2 ENnie award nominations. Actually, talking about Russ Morrissey, Russ started the ENnies years ago, and then he handed it off a few years back. But that's why they're the ENnies, because it's the Ian World thing.
Yeah, I remember Ian World before Russ had bought it from Eric when it was when the
Eric
EN
Noah.
stood for Eric Noah. Yeah,
Eric Noah, that's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Eric's still. I've bumped into Eric a few times online through Russ. They're still friends. But what was your ENnie award for?
I'm trying to remember now.
You humble son of a gun.
Yeah.
And you've also had 2 ENnie award nominations. So
yeah.
yeah. Now, if you remember, send me a text, or I do audio footnotes. So while I'm editing the podcast, I can throw that in.
I probably got that in my gaming resume, and it's the specifics of it, and I just didn't put it in the timeline.
All right. Yeah, cool. If you remember, just let me know. But congrats. You've won 2 of the bigger awards in gaming, RPG gaming for sure. And you've been nominated a lot too. You've been nominated 4 times for Origins and twice for ENnies, and these are in additions to your wins. Allan, continuing your bio, Allan is known online as Grohe, where he publishes a website featuring World of Greyhawk content. We were talking before the show started recording that you're a big Greyhawk guy, and in fact, you have a current AD&D Greyhawk campaign, if I'm not mistaken.
I have a few, actually.
Yeah. Oh, do you? All right.
Yeah.
As well as his non-gaming writing, poetry, personal essays, and literary scholarship, and the usual fan ephemera. Great use of the word ephemera, Allan.
Thanks.
And the usual fan ephemera at greyhawkonline.com/Grodog. Folks, always go to the show notes at shaneplays.com. And when this episode drops, I'll have all this stuff in the show notes, all the links, etc. And then Allan lives in Wichita, Kansas with his lovely wife, Heather. Their 2 wonderful sons, Ethan and Henry. I've met Henry, played with Henry, great kid. And their 2 cats, Muffin and Felix. I'll edit that out about Tara and Gypsy.
Sure.
So, unless you want me to leave it in, and we can
That's up to you. Yeah.
We can give them a tribute. So that's your bio, and I want to salute you again, Allan. You sent me this amazing. Like I don't have to have this to have a guest on. But you sent me this amazing bio and list of highlights. I mean, it's. I know you said you work. We were talking offline before the show started, and your career includes knowledge management. And boy, it shows, because you sent me some fantastic information, including like a highlights and timeline of all your time in gaming work. So. So that's, usually I just go out and start digging online and finding what I can before a guest comes on. But this is just wonderful. So I really would like to, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, that I think we should do a Greyhawk show at some point, because I think you're the person I've run across that is probably deepest into Greyhawk of anybody I've met. I mean, I've met people who like Greyhawk and like to talk about Greyhawk, but you're like way into Greyhawk. So, and there's a lot of stuff in your timeline and personal information about Greyhawk. I did want to ask, what is Greytalk? I did a little bit of search on that, but used to be involved. I found some references to where the archives, but I didn't find anything on Greytalk itself.
The Greytalk archives, unfortunately, disappeared because they were running on an old Lotus Notes server. And they never got ported into a more contemporary database format structure. So a guy so Greytalk was a listserv, an email subscription list.
I remember.
Yeah. And it started in the early 1990s, maybe 1993 or 4. I did not end up joining Greytalk, I think, until about 1997 or 98, somewhere right in that zone, because it was when I was working at Sprint that I found it. And it's it was the hub of Greyhawk discussion as the internet was sort of maturing, along with all of the strong TSR presence at on America Online. Talk about going back into the depths of history. And there was a large Greyhawk, what they called folder back in the day on AOL, and I wasn't on AOL, so this is all stuff I know from just being around people who were around then. But that's where Eric Mona and Gary Holian and various number of sort of the significant fan creators for Greyhawk did their fan sharing and talking about Greyhawk and creating their own content and publishing that and sharing it. That's where the Oerth Journal started. And that's actually what Cannon Fire grew out of, was the Greyhawk mailing list. So Cannon Fire is sort of the public-facing website of the Greyhawk list. And the Greyhawk list actually still exists, even though it's mostly dead.
His daddy can't talk.
Look who knows so much, huh? Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead.
Since all the, very few people still post to it with any frequency.
Yeah, see here in your highlights here, you have in 2001, not only did you get married, so but you also, the first webpage was published for Grow Dog's Greyhawk, and then also you co-founded the Cannon Fire fan site for the World of Greyhawk. Yeah. And then you started working with Rob Kuntz, so that most people will recognize his name. So what is it about Greyhawk that appeals to you so much? Obviously, it was Gary Gygax's setting, right? His campaign world.
Sure.
It wasn't the first published, but it was probably the first setting for D&D since Gary was creating it. But what about it, other than that, other than the historical interest, is so appealing to you about Greyhawk?
So there's probably a bunch of things that kind of drew me into Greyhawk. But as a kid, I was a subscriber to Dragon Magazine. So I liked the world of Greyhawk. I bought a copy of the folio set at a convention when I was a kid from some guy who was selling stuff at like a flea market area in one of the conventions I went to on the East Coast. And I bought the folio then. And as I began to kind of learn how to play the game properly, because the way that I learned was sort of this mishmash of various things, some of which had really nothing to do with how to play D&D for real. But as I was reading the Dungeon Master's Guide for the first time in 1980, and learning how to run the game and learning more about the inspirations, there were references throughout the Dungeon Master's Guide, throughout the Holmes Basic set, to Greyhawk. And obviously all the modules that have been published by TSR were set in Greyhawk. So it really encouraged me as someone who was interested in the setting and interested in learning more about it to start to try to go back and find more information. And one of the interesting aspects of growing up then compared to now for researching the history of D&D and such was that there wasn't a lot out there. D&D was very popular, but there wasn't there was no PDF format available for anything to go find out-of-print books. Out-of-print books you'd have to buy at a used bookstore if you could find them, or at a convention, or you could back order issues from Dragon Magazine. So a lot of my research into Greyhawk and my sort of researchy approach to knowledge management for Greyhawk, or for knowledge management as a career, grew out of that interest for backtracking information. So Dragon Magazine had a couple issues that published indexes of what was in the content for the zine, for the magazine, and I would pull those up and go back and look for issues that talked about Greyhawk, or that had, when I learned more, look for specific columns that were written by Gary Gygax or by Rob Kuntz or by Len Lakofka, and go back and track them down. So it was very much a sort of hunt and peck method. So I think some of that process of discovery and exploring the history of the setting and trying to find these older pieces of information mimics what I like about actually playing D&D, that exploration side of things. And
Ooh, what
that's
an
all.
interesting way to think about it. Yeah,
And that's all part of how we learn and acquire knowledge and what interests us and things. So that, I think, is a good chunk of what hooked me about it, in addition to all the sort of interesting things about the setting. The artifacts and relics in the Dungeon Master's Guide all have hints back into Greyhawk, and some of them have additional information that's a little different when they first appeared in the Eldritch Wizardry supplement in OD&D, and some of them, even before that, appeared first in the Strategic Review, which was the precursor to Dragon magazine, or The Dragon, as it was called before it was
The
renamed.
Dragon.
Yeah. So I think that whole, kind of researchy side of things definitely hit me right in the geek bullseye.
Yeah. Direct hit, huh? Well, that's cool that it led into skills and passions that have become your career. I think that happens a lot with gamers, actually, that the gaming and that certain elements of gaming and kind of sharpen your tools for later in life for certain careers. So you mentioned the Dragon and back in the day trying to find information. So I've talked some with I can't believe I'm John Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know John.
Playing at the World and Game Wizards, and he's got another book out fairly recently. I can't think of the top of my head, but
The Elusive Shift.
The Elusive
and he also
Shift,
did
right.
Art and Arcana. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So John, I've had him on the show a couple of times. He'll chat with me on DMs on Twitter some and stuff. And we've talked a lot about the importance of zines back in the day for fandom.
Yeah.
Massive. I mean, for his scholarship, zines are so important. But I think what doesn't get mentioned as much, and you brought up how hard it was to track information down or to find information. If you're 20 or even 30-year-old these days, or a teenager or something, you don't get how important like Dragon was, because or there was Dungeon in the UK, and then you had like White Dwarf magazine and some other stuff. You didn't, and I know it's like you kids, we walked up the hill both ways in the snow, but the
no
reason
shoes.
that people, no shoes, having coal for breakfast. I mean, there was no internet. There was none of this. I mean, if you wanted information, there was no drive-through RPG or whatever. The reason that people hold Dragon magazine in such high esteem is, one, it was a fun magazine, right? But it was the D&D website of its day. I mean, there wasn't any.
Dragon was the internet for D&D.
Right. For D&D, if you didn't.
And other games too, before it became more of a house organ. Yeah.
Right. Or, like I said, you could get White Dwarf magazine or some other stuff. But that, and see, I never even knew when I was a teenager growing up, I didn't even know what a zine was. But now I find out in the 70s and the 80s how important zines were. Those were the forums of the day. That's where all the debating was happening.
Right. That's where the term Dungeon Master came from, was from the zine community.
Right. And there was debates on what to call it and all this stuff. So, when Allan's talking about tracking stuff down, he doesn't mean that he jumped on his computer and logged into a bulletin board system, which is what it would have been back in the day if it wasn't, America Online or something, and did a quick search. I mean, he's out there really digging to find this stuff. So,
Yeah, so like Dragon had 2 issues that included an index of the first X issues of Dragon. And the first one that was published was in like the, I don't know, 30s or 40s or something. And it was not as complete as the one that appeared in Dragon 76. That one was much more substantial. And that was my go-to for trying to track down old issues at conventions and things like that. And then, back in the day, there was the Reader's Guide to Periodic Literature. And I did some school reports on Dungeons and Dragons as a kid.
So let me ask on this periodic guide or this guide to periodic literature. Did you go to this strange location called a library?
Yeah.
And there was all these bound books that would direct you to where to find stuff. And
That's
this
right.
weird thing called microfiche, and that doesn't mean little tiny fish swimming around. And
Right.
card catalogs.
Yep,
Ooh,
yep.
that's esoteric. Anyway.
So the Reader's Guide to Periodic Literature started including information about D&D as D&D was becoming more popular. There wasn't a lot in it, is what I remember back in the day. And then, so I think my first sort of research-ish piece around John Eric Holmes was I tracked down a copy of his Confessions of a Dungeon Master article through.
And just hold on, just so for the people that don't know, John Herrick Holmes wrote the first basic D&D.
He did, yeah, which is the version I started playing with, thanks to our school librarian, because we had a copy of the Holmes basic set at our school library.
Yeah, most people think of the Red Box and Frank Mincer, which is a wonderful edition of D&D. It started many D&D careers, if you will. But you had OD&D, which was the 3 little books. And then you had the Holmes Basic. And then you had Moldvay's BX. And then you had Mincer's Basic. So, right. So anyway. And speaking of John Eric Holmes, how thrilled were you later in your life to publish some of his work?
Oh, it was great. So I corresponded very briefly with Eric when we lived in California. And he sent me copies of some of his original submissions to Alarms and Excursions, because I had written him a fan letter saying, hey, are there any more Boinger and Zaris stories beyond the 1 or 2 or 3 that I had read in Dragon magazine at that point? And he had mentioned one that I had missed in the indexes at the time, because they didn't include fiction in the indexes for whatever reason. They were looking just at the gaming material and the scope of what they included in the index. So I hadn't known about one of the stories that he had published in Dragon earlier, and so I dug that up eventually. And really and then he sent me some of the material that appeared in Alarms and Excursions, which was one of the earliest zines that supported D&D back in the day, starting sometime in maybe late 1974 or early 1975. And he wrote about, he and his son, Chris Holmes, contributed about 5 or 6 different pieces to Alarms and Excursions in the issues between roughly issue 11 and issue 20. And we kind of have all that in the book. Yeah.
It's spelled like alarums, but it's Alarms and Excursions.
Yeah.
That was a very, if I remember right, that was a very well-known zine of the time. Or was it a magazine? Was it a full magazine or was it a zine?
No. It's an APA, so it's an Amateur Press Association zine, and it consists of mini zines or newsletters written up by each author. They would type it up and either provide their own copies or provide Lee Gold, who's the editor for Alarms and Excursions still, and would be a great person to interview sometime if you
love to.
have not.
Yeah. Love to.
But people would send in their content, and then Lee would compile them into the issue and then redistribute the fully completed issue out to all the subscribers and contributors. So it really was again sort of an internet-like vehicle done through print mimeograph technology.
I can't tell you how many times that I've heard Lee, her name mentioned with reverence and respect. I mean, because it's Lee Gold, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And John Peterson has nothing but like I said, it's almost, it's respect almost on, awe for what she contributed to the community. And I've heard many other people speak of her extremely well. So yeah,
there's a lot of designers who started their careers in alarms and excursions. So.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so in 2017, you had the honor of publishing Tales of Peril, the complete Boinger and Zareth stories of John Eric Holmes. Again, of course, from Holmes Basic. So that was Black Blade Publishing did that. So, I can't imagine, but that wasn't a thrill for you.
Oh yeah, and it was a long time coming. John died, I want to say, in like 2011, and I'd gotten in touch with his family. No, in 2010, and I'd gotten in touch with his family, trying to reach out again to him to just kind of follow up after about 10 years from the first time I did. And he had just passed, but his ex-wife put me in touch with Chris Holmes, his son, and we got talking, and that's what really began the genesis of talking about putting Tales of Peril together. But it took about 5 years to get all the material and just the time to bring the book to fruition. So
I actually met at the most recent North Texas RPG Con. I met Chris Holmes.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, I played in a game of Tecumel with him, sat and chatted with him. Like after the games, a lot of people will hover around the bar area and chat later at night. Chatted with him. He wants to come on the show, and I want to have him on because he wants to talk about his dad. Yeah. So that's another I have lined up to get on. He was a very nice guy in his own right. You said he was contributing to zines as well?
So he and his dad both contributed to some of the articles. So he did a little bit of writing with Eric for some of the pieces. And then Chris contributed artwork to them. And Chris is an artist today. And so he also included original art in Tales of Peril. He did at least one piece for each of the stories in the book. So in addition to writing introductions for each one as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having Chris on. So let's now that we're I did want to ask you about something you brought up because it was interesting to me, and then I want to get into Black Blade Publishing since we're talking about some of the stuff Black Blade has published, and then also we'll be talking about OSRIC, which is the AD&D OSR retro clone that you contributed to. But you mentioned that you played D&D for the first time at age 7. Now, I think that's more common these days. I see people like who've grown up playing D&D and now they're playing it with their kids. I can think specifically, you may have met him at North Texas, a guy named Carl Heil. He runs D&D for younger kids, and it's wonderful to watch him do it. He has so much fun, and the kids have fun. But in 1977, I think it was, you played for the first time at 7 years old, and at that point, that would be rather unusual. Not bad. I don't want to hear what people are, but I'm saying different. That would have been unusual for the time. So, how did you end up playing D&D for the first time at 7 years old?
So, in 77, my youngest brother, so I'm the oldest of 4. So he's the third youngest sibling I have. He was born, and the house I grew up in was too small for us at that point. So my parents moved. We moved across town inside the same town, a small town called Merchantville, New Jersey, which is over the bridge from Philadelphia, kind of sandwiched between Camden, New Jersey, and Cherry Hill. And in 77, when we moved, there was a guy down the street who was older than me by a few years by then. He was probably, let's see, I was in first grade in 77. So my guess is he was probably in like fifth or sixth grade or something. And he was playing D&D. So we would go over to John Lewandowski's house and play D&D there. And what we played was sort of this interesting mishmash of kind of Holmes Basic, mashed up with the rules from the old Heritage Models miniatures sets for Crypt of the Sorcerer and Caverns of Doom. And then for miniatures, we would use some of those figures, and we would use Stratomatic football figures, the little old electronic ones, and they would kind of move around on the board on their own in little weird chaotic patterns. So we would take the figures and kind of paint them.
Is that where it would go? Where it would make a loud noise when you turned on the?
Yeah.
My brothers had that stuff, and what is it? So you set up, it's like a fake football field, and you set these figures up all over it, and then you turn a button on, and the football field vibrates, and it makes the little people move.
The pieces
around.
Move in kind of random fractal patterns. Yeah. So we took those figures and painted them different colors, and they would become miniatures because we didn't have enough miniatures to play with, broadly.
Right.
And so we'd paint green ones and they were orcs or goblins, and, red ones would be kobolds or whatever. And then we gave some of them toothpicks to give them a little bit of weapon differentiation and things like that.
Wow, look at you go. How old were you?
So, I was 7, 8 years old over that time. So that's kind of what my experience was playing D&D for the first 2.5, 3 years of my life of D&D, was playing this kind of weird mishmash of stuff that wasn't really, as I learned later, really quite D&D. So during that time, I did some of these school projects. So our librarian at the Merchantville Elementary School, Mrs. Mager, Elizabeth Mager, was our gifted teacher. So she's the one who had the basic set in the Holmes basic set in the school library.
Okay.
So I would, I could look at that there, and I assume that's what John had back at his house, if I'm remembering all that right. And then reading that, and then eventually in sometime like in early 1980, summer of 1980, I bought my own copies of the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and Dungeon Master's Guide. And
now we're moving into AD&D.
We are, yeah. And then I was waiting for Deities and Demigods to come out. I remember waiting for that to release at Gen Con so I could buy it when it came into our local bookstore at the mall. And it was really only then that I started learning really how to play the game. What we played before was fun and interesting, and it certainly kept me engaged enough to learn and stick with the game. But in retrospect, it was not really anything we would call D&D today. So that's how I started. It was, through the kind of the usual fashion of, learning from somebody older than you who taught you.
Right. I think a lot of people's first experiences of D&D, or at least maybe back in the day, I don't know if it's the same now, but when I was first playing D&D in the early 80s in junior high, looking back, we were playing this weird mix of BX and AD&D.
Oh yeah.
Depending on who was DMing. I didn't even know, but looking back, it's obvious that, that's what was going on when I've started trying to look up rules or make things reconcile in my head. And you know what? I had just as much fun playing that as, you know what I'm saying, as I do.
Oh, totally.
So it's, So, anyway, I want to mention
there's not a wrong way to play D&D.
There really
is. If you're
isn't.
having fun, that's,
I'll say one thing, and this is semi tongue in cheek and it's semi not. People beat up on rules lawyers. I will say one thing in defense of the rules lawyer. People hand people a book and say, here's the rules, here's how to play. And then when you start playing and they start saying, but the book says this, and people beat up on them. So that's the only thing I'll say, because there's certain types, if you hand them a book and say, this is how the game works, they're going to say, well, okay, well, here's the rules. You've told me this is what the rules are. Right. So if they question in a game, oh, I thought it was like this, that doesn't mean they're trying to be jerks. Now, there are some rules lawyers that are jerks that want to argue things into the ground and ruin everybody's fun. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the person that said, oh, well, I read about this encumbrance rule, or I thought that it worked like that. They're not trying to harsh everybody's gig or harsh everybody's mellow. They read the book you told them to read. So anyway, moving on.
That might just be the way that they grew up, learned how to play too. If
exactly.
you learned how to play using encumbrance, it changes the entire dynamic of what you do as a player if you're playing in a group that doesn't use encumbrance.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I remember I started reading the book and I was like, and I brought up encumbrance, or I typed up a character sheet and made a character sheet and I put encumbrance on it. And the people I play with are like, what's this about? And I'm like, well, it's in the book. I don't know. Right. I put it on the character sheet. So anyway, moving on. A couple other highlights. You went to the first gaming convention at Origins in 1980, and at that you met Gary Gygax there, and you play tested Gangbusters. That's very nice.
Yeah, I didn't recognize Gary, having played a game with him, because I didn't know who Gary Gygax was really at that point. I mean, his name was on the books, but it didn't mean anything to me. But later, when we would get some of the AD&D sets from Grenadier Models, one of the action arts, because Grenadier was also based in Philadelphia, so they attended all the local conventions. And you could buy individual figures out of the boxes without having to buy the whole box. So you could buy the cool figures you wanted without having to buy the whole thing. But anyway, in one of the action art sets, they had a picture of Gary Gygax in there. And it was sometime after we'd gotten the set, and it kind of finally clicked in my head. It's like, wait.
Oh, that's the guy.
I know who that guy is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that's wonderful when you get to just mingle with somebody without knowing who they are. But like I was in a game at North Texas RPG Con, and they kept calling the dude next to me Steve. I didn't realize till halfway through the game that was Steve Perrin. And we were just sitting there joking around and having a good time. And I think that made the experience better. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't like, oh, that's Steve Perrin. I don't want to say anything dumb, but you also, you went to the first Dragon Con to meet Michael Moorcock, and you met Rob Kuntz. So those are stuff. I'm bringing this stuff up to say that you've got, and you don't brag about it. I never even knew about all this stuff till I read your bio. You're just this nice guy, this cool dude that I've met in North Texas RPG Con and gotten to know over the years. But you've got legit RPG hobby cred. That's what I'm throwing this stuff out there for. And I would have never known it, which is one of the reasons why I love to do these podcasts, because you get to know people better and you learn more about what they do. Because I just wanted to have you on to talk about OSRIC and Blackblade. And then boom, here's all this other amazing stuff you've done. So anyway, so let's talk about Blackblade. And I did want to mention that not only do you still love Greyhawk, but you still actively run AD&D.
I do.
Right. But yeah, not 2.0 or not second edition, not third edition, not fourth edition, not 5e. You run AD&D, the original flavor.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I do that in a ongoing campaign. We had two campaigns that started right around the time of the pandemic here, and I started up two separate campaigns, which I haven't been able to do since I was in college. 'Cause I really wanted to have two groups interacting in the same campaign world and kind of influencing each other to some degree. But the in-person one folded, after about 6-9 months into the pandemic, unfortunately. But the online one, we've continued. So that first year in 2020, we virtual Greyhawk or virtual GaryCon happened, and we had a group of friends who we would normally get together and play with the conventions, and I ran some Castle Greyhawk that weekend, and that became the online Greyhawk campaign that I've been running since then. So some of the players have shifted over the years, but that particular campaign started. And then I also have a one-on-one campaign with my younger son Henry, and then he runs a one-on-one campaign for me, which is set in Greyhawk. And then I have another game for both of the boys, which is their Castle Greyhawk characters that they've been running since they were little. In my version of Castle Greyhawk. So
I love that.
And then I run stuff at conventions too. So I've run my version of Castle Greyhawk and various other games at virtual Greyhawk Con at North Texas at Gary Con for like the last 12 years or whatever now.
So how active do you think the AD&D / Greyhawk community still is out there? I mean, it would be folded under the OSR community these days. Or it would be considered OSR these days, but how active do you think like people playing the original AD&D still is out there?
I think there's quite a bit of interest in sort of the OSR more broadly, and in OSRIC and AD&D in general. And I would say the interest has been increasing if we kind of judge that from OSRIC sales over the last, say, 4 years or so, compared to what it was earlier when we were first creating and then publishing OSRIC. It's definitely been an uptick of interest in that. And I think some of that is people have been new people have been coming into D&D through 5th edition, since it's the biggest, most popular version of the game since it was a fad in the 80s.
Right.
And it might even be bigger than it was then.
Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast would have they claim it is based on sales and this and that. I don't know. It's huge. 5e is huge.
Right.
There are people that like 5e. There are people that hate 5e. There are people that are ambivalent on 5e. But one thing you can't argue is that 5e is huge and has been good for the visibility of D&D and the RPG hobby in general. And
agreed. It's brought in a lot of new players, maybe in the sort of a generational influx of players that we haven't really seen since the 1990s, with Vampire really pulling in a whole ton of female gamers and lots of additional role players compared to traditional RPGs, from
right.
That. So
and it causes some divisions in the hobby, but people wanting to play with different styles.
Sure.
But the hobby has grown, and that is good.
So I think 5th edition has kind of helped that from an influx point of view. And some of the 5th edition's been out long enough now that I think a lot of folks who've played 5th edition and are starting to look around for some other options or tapping back into some of that history of the hobby, since it's much more accessible now than when we were kids, or young adults or whatever, because there are there's a lot of visibility and appreciation and understanding of the history that didn't exist 20 and 30 years ago outside of the sort of core RPG fandom.
I've been playing RPGs since the early mid 80s. I've never seen it like this, to where not only are a lot more people playing, but so many TV shows will have quote unquote D&D episodes now. And, you've got like the Big Bang Theory and made it, they were playing D&D and Community. Sure. And then you've got the D&D movie coming out that has major, like Chris Pine in it. You've got, all the Let's Plays. Like Critical Role is a major entertainment force. It's not just a few RPG people watching a live stream. I mean, that's a big deal. And those are just I'm just mentioning a few things. I mean, you go to Walmart now and there are RPG dice and RPG toys in Walmart. It's just a cultural thing now. It's
Yeah, well,
normal.
and fantasy is
Yeah.
so much more mainstream now after
Yeah.
the Jackson Lord of the Rings movies really took off so much that, again, there unless you kind of lived through the dearth of fantasy materials or the terrible fantasy movies that were available in the 70s and 80s.
Well, they're fun from a kitsch factor, but they're not good movies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like I could watch Deathstalker from or not even Deathstalker. Let me think of a better example. Beastmaster. Beastmaster is really not a great movie, but it's a fun movie, right? But the quality that's coming out now is just tremendous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So anyway, all right. So I just wanted to I want to move us over into the OSR and OSRIC. But since what is it about AD&D? Is it just because you're like it works and there's no sense to do something else, or do you feel that it's just inherently superior to playing some other games to stick with it?
Well, I think it works really well for long-term campaigning as opposed to short campaigns, which is kind of how third edition really started redefining campaign play, and how Pathfinder does the same thing through the adventure path. Both of those really changed the approach to what it means to play D&D kind of over the longer term. D&D always had one shots. You could play one shots at conventions, or you'd play single session, single use few session modules. That's been kind of bread and butter for module adventure publishing, since TSR's heyday. But I think AD&D really supports that longer term, deeper character exploration, and it works for me. I mean, I've got other friends who play Exalted and would talk about Exalted in the same manner as I do about AD&D, and I've certainly enjoyed and played games in Vampire or Amber Diceless or whatever in the same way. But I think AD&D it works really well for that kind of approach to campaign playing. And I think, again, that's a little bit of another feature for OSR gaming and for maybe saying Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or something like that that might be a little bit more of an attractor for someone who's coming into the hobby and having only kind of played published adventures, and they're ready to start creating their own material and their own campaigns or their own homebrew world. So I love Greyhawk, but I've got a homebrew world that I'd run in parallel with Greyhawk for 20 or 30 years too.
So is your homebrew world, is it epic high fantasy or like what? Because Greyhawk is what I would call high fantasy, or it's what you think of with a medieval fantasy world that has magic, right? I mean,
yeah,
so
agreed.
is your homebrew world similar? Or?
Yeah, it is. So it's basically it grew out of the first campaigns that I created, which were rip-off of names from Greyhawk and the Silmarillion, and mashed together. But it's the way I do it, it's a sister world to Greyhawk. So they're planarly close, and there's kind of some flow between them, and some of the organizations and characters are present in both worlds, and there's cross-planar trade and things like that.
Fun.
So, I think those kinds of architectures for play and how we play the game, I think AD&D does really well, and I think that's why it's still got legs. 40 years on.
So, and talking about settings, like my first love in fantasy. Now I'll play anything. I'll play weird stuff. I'll play, because there's all these different variations on what fantasy can be, right?
Oh, sure.
What we think
That's
of
why
a
we have so
fantasy
many
is
flavors of role-playing games, you know.
right. And in fact, if you look through Appendix N, a lot of that is not what people think of as the setting for D&D. But my first love is still that quasi Tolkien medieval world with magic, right? That's what I'm always going to default to. But I don't mind exploring out and getting into the weird stuff at all. That can be really fun. But my first love is going to be like a Dragonlance or a Greyhawk or a Forgotten Realms. Just give me that, that's what I'm always going to fall back to for my.
Yeah, so Gabor Lux has this term he uses. Gabor is one of the shining stars in OSRdom from a
Okay.
design and production point of view in general. So he's talked about vanilla fantasy, and that's a
Works for me.
complimentary term. It's not derogatory in the way that some people talk about vanilla ice cream improperly, I might add, when they do that. But
Right. Well, vanilla is the most popular flavor. So of ice cream out there, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be fancy to be good, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be exotic to be good. So but yeah, I'll play all kinds of stuff. I'll play anything as a one shot. That's one of the reasons I like to go to cons, to run or play in stuff I don't normally get to play. But my weekly escapism, because that's what it is escapism, right? For me anyway. I'm not trying to solve the world's problems. I'm not trying to learn more about myself. I'm not trying to. And there are people that use RPGs that way. And there's literally, and I don't even mean it in a Jerry Seinfeld way when I go, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, seriously, there's nothing wrong with that. Using RPGs in all these amazing ways that people are using them now. But I want a weekly escape. I want to go have fun in a fun world, and vanilla fantasy is fine with me. So anyway, let's talk about OSR. You actually have, and I'll link it in the show notes at shaneplays.com. You have Grow Dogs on your AD&D blog at growdog.blogspot.com. You have an OSR guide that is a FAQ of questions that you ask yourself and then answer about OSR. So I'll link that. In OSR, people say, old school rules or old school Renaissance or whatever. In your elevator pitch, what is the OSR?
Well, I think of OSR kind of these days in sort of multiple I don't know, layers, I guess. There's sort of the original layer of OSR that OSRIC and Basic Fantasy and Swords and Wizardry kind of grew out of with the core retro clones. So that's sort of first generation OSR. And then there's sort of the wave of additional clones that came afterward, filling in the gaps and kind of broadening the base of what OSR kind of covers. And then there have been all these folks who've taken it as a platform and then launched completely brand new games and approaches to sort of like indie RPG side of OSRdom.
Right.
And that's what I would kind of consider the newest OSR side of it.
I didn't see that coming until it exploded.
Yeah.
So we are in what I call right now they have that in the fossil record. There's a thing called the Cambrian explosion.
Oh yeah.
And in the past 10 years or so is the Cambrian explosion of the tabletop RPG hobby.
Absolutely.
Because there's so much amazing stuff happening on the indie side. Like if you go to itch.io, there is a role-playing game for every niche you can possibly imagine. The purpose of role playing, the type of role playing, the rules for role playing are being just developed and explored in ways I never would have imagined. Right? Like earlier, I was saying, I mean, there are literally people using RPGs, not for fun, but for like working on through psychology and helping people with issues and learning more. Like, let's play this RPG so that we can learn more about what it's like to be a member of this society or a minority. Or, I mean, it's there's amazing things happening.
Yeah, Eric Mona commented in the closing panel we had at the virtual Greyhawk Con last weekend that he's playing a GURPS game, and they're playing medieval peasants, and it's a show that's being streamed, and I don't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head, but they're 14th century peasants, and he said that they were in the process of kind of getting ready to close out that exploration, and that it was a lot of fun, but they're just peasants surviving day to day and tilling fields and kind of landlocked and land owned as tenant farmers and whatever else. So yeah.
It's amazing the stuff that's happening out there. And there's a niche, like if you love some obscure cartoon from the early 70s that only ran for half a season, you can find the RPG for it these days. Somebody out there is doing it. I mean, it's amazing. Right. I listed, there was, I can't remember.
Space Ghost, the RPG, or whatever.
Whatever. Yeah. Josie and the Pussycats, the RPG, it's out there. And it's amazing. Watch. And like, there's this guy, I can't believe I've forgotten his name. I follow his stuff. So the name of the RPG designer I was trying to remember there is Tim Hutchings. He did 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, which is a solo RPG that it's amazing. Like you have to, the longer you live as a vampire, you have to choose which memories you're going to lose so that you can make new memories. And it's just this really powerful, his stuff is like poetry as an RPG, but he did another one called Apollo 47 or something like that, where there's only like, and it's a moon, you're going to the moon, but it's only like 1 or 2 pages of rules. And the rest of it is all the just, you talk about ephemera. It's all this ephemera from the Apollo program, like this huge, thick. So you get 1 or 2 pages of rules, and then you just get all this atmosphere. It's really interesting what people are doing with RPGs these days. But one that I can think of that comes to mind, and I wish I could remember the name of it. And the name of that game is, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, Jiangxi Blood in the Banquet Hall by Wet Ink Games. But it was about, you were a Chinese immigrant family running a Chinese restaurant in America, but then you're also having to deal with the Chinese version of vampires. And not only did you have to deal with the vampires, but it taught you what it was to be like, what it was like, because you see Chinese restaurants everywhere. Culturally, that's very important to Chinese immigrating to America. They come in, they start a restaurant, a lot of them. And the struggles and what it was like to be in their shoes at the same time that you're fighting vampires. So it's the Chinese version. So it taught you more about the Chinese culture.
So it's sort of the like the Harlem Unbound for the Chinese cultural immigrant experience.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and see, in the 80s, 90s, or whatever, I would have never thought RPGs would have gone all that direction. But there's a flip side to generational clash, right? Generations clash because they have different wants and needs and ways of seeing the world. But you also get this wonderful stuff that your generation didn't think of, right? These other generations are getting hold of it or just running with it in directions I never even imagined. All right, anyway. Back to the OSR. So for me, the OSR is just you're playing old school games, which I do a lot of, or you're playing new games that feel old school and have that atmosphere, right? That's what it is for me. But OSR is not a defined term. It can mean different things.
It means a lot of things. To different groups. Yeah.
Like I could sit down and play. I'll still play BX D&D. In a way, I'm doing OSR gaming. I'm doing old school gaming. I'll play AD&D. I'll play the old West End game Star Wars. I ran Middle Earth role playing at North Texas RPG Con.
And
That's
killed
all.
Henry's character.
I did. Yeah, he climbed under the tower, and there was a bunch of dynamite or black powder under there, and he saved the day but sacrificed his character. And then and again, I really enjoy playing with Henry. Good kid.
Yeah, he had a good time.
But and then you've got stuff like Dungeon Crawl Classics, Swords and Wizardry. There's too many OSR games to list. I'm going to miss something, so I'm not trying to. You got Labyrinth Lord. You've got there's another one out there. Old School Essentials. You've got these things called retro clones that are basically deconstructing and then putting old games back together and maybe improving some mechanics or adding some stuff. And that's OSR. So there's this whole community of OSR out there.
Yeah, so if somebody's looking for the flavors of what OSR games are out there from a clone point of view, the taxidermic owlbear is a great resource, and I popped the link into the chat.
Yeah,
for
I'm gonna add this to the show notes right now.
And until you actually see this list, there's no way you would guess that there were 20 plus OD&D clones, and that there's 20 more first edition clones and second edition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a ton of flavors of clones out there, some of which address different kind of approaches to the game, some of which are science fictional versions based on OD&D or AD&D, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But it's basically, it's like I said, I'm not going to attempt to define what the OSR is because everybody has their own definition. But it's just like I would consider North Texas RPG Con an OSR heavy con because there's a lot of OSR style gaming happening there.
Sure.
And then of course you got like Gamehole Con and Gary Con and all that. So. And that's where more and more, like I run 5e for my weekly group because I started running it at a game store to help the store in 2015. So I was running 5e because that's the current flavor, right? They want to sell 5e stuff. And so we've just stayed with, even though we've, the store closed during COVID and now we just kept our group going. We stay with 5e because that's what we're playing. But every now and then, I'll run like Keep on the Borderlands and BX in between campaigns, or I'll run I ran the original Ravenloft and the original AD&D rules during a break at Halloween last year, that kind of thing. But even though my weekly group is 5e, I'm more and more very interested in OSR and wanting to play more and more OSR. Or play more and more OSR style stuff. So I mentioned Carl Heil before. He runs a great BX game.
Right.
Yeah. So, and he just makes it up as he goes along. He's got like little dominoes that he's painted to look like walls. And he just makes up the dungeon as he goes along. And it's amazing. Like one of my favorite things that happened, this to me is like kind of what I define as old school. Like we were playing BX. I finally found a magic sword and I was happy. And then like 2 rooms later, it got destroyed by a rust monster. And that made me happy. It made me happy. I was like, yes, and so anyway, Black Blade Publishing publishes a lot of different stuff. You don't publish just games, you publish resources, books. I bought books from you, like is it Kuntz doing the book about Arneson? Yeah. So you publish a lot, or you print a lot more than just games, but games wise, OSR, I think you were the first to publish Swords and Wizardry, which is a well-known OSR game. But is that with Frog God now?
It is now, yeah. So I think when we were publishing Swords and Wizardry, Matt had already first published it under Mythmere Games. And
Okay.
then he'd approached us about publishing together, which we did for a few years early on in Black Blades publishing.
Okay.
And then he shifted over to Frog God and took Swords and Wizardry with. And then recently he left Frog God and has retained Swords and Wizardry.
Okay.
So he's back to publishing under Mythmere Games again.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's gone full circle. Um, but I mean that, Swords and Wizardry comes up a lot. Like a lot of the Kickstarters you see out there, they'll be like, you can get this adventure in 5e or Swords and Wizardry, or whatever. So Swords and Wizardry has a decent footprint in the OSR community.
It does. It does.
Yeah, and then so you publish that, and then you publish OSRIC. So tell us about OSRIC. I know I've mentioned OSRIC a million times so far in this podcast, but tell us what OSRIC is and what your role was with it.
Sure. So OSRIC is an acronym, and it stands for Old School Reference and Index Compilation. And when you look at the name sort of in full, it reflects a lot about what the first generation OSR design goals were when it was being put together. So, so Matt did the initial set of design work for OSRIC, and then Stuart Marshall finished the first draft of OSRIC, which is really not what today people talk about when they talk about OSRIC, like the Black Blade Usherwood version that we have, or the OSRIC Player's Guide, or whatever. Because when OSRIC was first created, it was not intended to be a fully complete standalone game. It was a vehicle to allow people to publish AD&D adventures under the safe harbor of the OSRIC license, which is based on the OGL, the open game license that Wizards created as part of 3rd edition.
So it was a legal avenue. It was an avenue for people to legally publish AD&D stuff. Okay.
That's right. And it was the first large-scale clone to do that in a true clone-based approach. So what OSRIC did was sort of lay the foundation for later clones to build on and follow in the footsteps, because OSRIC still exists and obviously showed that the safe harbor approach for it was legally viable.
So was it initially? Now it's obviously grown past that, but initially was it a legal goal first, and then everything else was secondary? Like, we need to find a legal path to allow people to legally publish this stuff, and oh, by the way, let's put this together. Or was it, hey, let's do a useful thing for the AD&D community, and then, oh, this could be legally helpful too? Like, do you know what the original goals were?
Yeah, so it was a bit of both for that. Mm-hmm. So it grew out of the AD&D communities, largely based in Dragon's Foot, in the community of forums there, as well as Knights and Knaves Alehouse, which is where OSRIC is still, the OSRIC license is still homed at the Knights and Knaves Alehouse at knights-n-knaves.com/OSRIC. So that framework, the idea behind it was that it would allow people to publish first edition adventures using the same consistent terminology that exist in the OGL. So armor class is armor class, and hit points are hit points, etc. None of the old generic stuff like Judges Guild and roll aids, right, hits to kill, and people having endurance instead of constitution, and whatever. So it basically established that common terminology and nomenclature based on the rules out of the OGL. But it wasn't originally intended to be a standalone game. It was this publishing vehicle. So it really did start out as a way to enable the fan community for first edition, who were reacting against the approach to game design that was driving D&D 3rd edition. And it was taking the tools of 3rd edition through the open game license and then using those tools to say, we want to play and publish AD&D kind of material, and we now have the right way to do it. But that said, there was rapidly a lot of demand and interest in OSRIC not merely being a publishing reference document, but being a full AD&D playable clone. And that's what OSRIC is today. So, the OSRIC rulebook that we publish is basically a 1-volume collection of your player's handbook, monster manual, and dungeon master's guide in one set of covers today. And it's very affordable too. And that was part of the reasoning behind both OSRIC being a free license and a free product to help support that free access to the rule set that we love. And then Black Blade, we're publishing what is essentially a $50 or $60 hardcover, and we sell it essentially at cost as a service to the community. So it's a $26 hardcover.
Yeah, it's a ridiculously good deal. I've got mine right here. I bought mine from you at your booth at Black Blade at North Texas. In fact, I asked you to sign.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I like your stuff, so I always buy something at your booth because you always have cool stuff.
Yeah.
I bought the Tecumel reprints, which are excellent. I bought history books. You've got like little modules for all this OSR. You just got and you also sell stuff on behalf of Goodman Games. So you've always got a great booth. I can't remember exactly what your relationship is with. You're not technically Goodman, but you rep.
We're not. So we represent Goodman at GaryCon and at North Texas, and we represent a lot of friends in the publishing community. So I love being able to introduce people at conventions to adventures and source books and design guidance and how-to books and stuff like that are published by people like Guy Fullerton and Gabor Lux and Anthony Husso and Trent Smith and many, many other folks who are in the OSR space, and we love to be able to bring that to the conventions we attend, which is just GaryCon in North Texas these days.
I need to make it to GaryCon. Right now, North Texas, unless it's a very local convention, North Texas is really my only convention each year. But I'd love to get to GaryCon and Gamehole Con. So
yeah, I would love to get to Gamehole Con. I've been to Gen Con, and Gen Con's just too big for me.
I have no interest in Gen Con or Dragon Con. They're too big. That's just not what I want. Yeah,
agreed.
When they show that picture of like 50,000 people waiting for the doors to open, I think they show that to hype it up. And maybe for a lot of people that does hype it up, but that makes me go, there's no way I want to go there.
Agreed.
I guess I'm becoming a grumpy old grognard. So, but anyway, North Texas is perfect. I love North Texas.
Yeah. So, and like I said, we love bringing all this kind of breadth of material to the conventions. So that people who wouldn't know or ever see the work of someone like Paolo Greco, for example, out of Scotland, can have the opportunity to buy their work at the booth.
Right. Well, you've always got a great mix of stuff. And I've got like a poster I bought from you that it's like the history of.
Oh yeah, from Paul Stormberg. Yeah.
So I love that stuff. I geek on it really hard. So,
so OSRIC then, so OSRIC kind of helped kick off and was essentially a foundation for all the rest of the OSR to follow, because it was really the first real attempt to take the OGL and clone an earlier edition of the game with such fidelity. And that's where the legal safe harbor was important, because it hadn't been done before. And people weren't sure it was going to be legal. There were whisper campaigns
Right.
against OSRIC from old school
Right.
publishers who saw it as competitive. And there were certainly some fans who were against it at the time as well, saying, it's not legal to do that. I'm reporting you to WotC and stuff like that.
Well,
and,
report us. They have an OGL. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. And,
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so OSRIC has stood the test of time, and I think much the way that AD&D has. And I think the fact that it's still here, and it's actually, I would argue, it's more popular now than it was when we were first publishing it, and it was still sort of, hot off the presses, so to speak, as a clone. Because rewinding the clock a little bit, right around the same time we first published OSRIC is when WotC had the lull between when they'd announced 5th edition and it hadn't been published yet.
Right.
And that was when they reprinted the AD&D books. So we had just done our first big printing of OSRIC at the time that the AD&D books first came back into print for the, in the first time in, 20 years or more. And so, our initial sales were pretty slow at that point compared to what they are now.
Right. Is there, I feel like I almost hear like a saxophone or something in the background when you talk.
Yeah, that's my oldest son, Ethan, playing saxophone. If you can hear it, then...
yeah, it just started like within the past couple of minutes, I think.
Yeah.
At least I just noticed it. Yeah.
My mic usually filters out that stuff pretty well. So
yeah. I mean, I don't think it sounds awful. It was just something I noticed. So it's not like drowning you out or anything like that.
Okay.
So what was the first, I'm looking through the timeline here. I see that you completed work on editing and developing OSRIC in 2007. What was the year that it was first published?
So OSRIC was first published in 2006 in this early 1.0.
That very
form.
Okay.
Yeah, when it was only like 60-ish pages and was not a complete game in and of itself. You needed to have the AD&D books to use the OSRIC rules as published then initially. Because it was a reference.
It was
index.
A reference to where stuff was where you could find stuff, right? That's why it's called that's why the name of it is Old School Reference and Index Compilation. It was, here's where I find the stuff in first edition. So, and then in 2012 is when the
expanded 2.0 version came out. Yes. And that's when, the full list of monsters were added and all of the magic item descriptions and prices for them and the full class descriptions. That's when OSRIC became a standalone game, essentially.
Right. Well, yeah, the way you described it to me, well, first of all, I want to come back to that, the way you described it to me, but I want to ask, what does it feel like to be involved in a project that was so foundational to what became the OSR? How does that feel?
It's cool. It's fun. I guess I don't think about it in those terms very often or regularly. I've been kind of hip deep in online fandom in Greyhawk and in the OSR and stuff, for a long time. So it feels very natural to me in that sense. I don't really think of it any more than, you think about putting your socks on in the morning. So from that point of view, it's just kind of normal. When you look at sort of the full breadth of everything that's come from it since, it's very cool, and it's very fun to be have helped enable gaming to push outward from OSRIC in all the directions we've talked about with the newer OSR platforms and clones and clone independent games and new SR and everything like that.
So let me ask it from a slightly different angle, because you obviously have a very easygoing, humble outlook on what OSR or what OSRIC did and your contribution to it. Do you feel that the OSR in general, the movement, community, whatever you want to call it, do you feel that it's important?
Yeah, I think so. The OSR, I see the OSR a lot like the non-TSR publishing of the 1970s and 80s. There's a huge amount of DIY spirit and creativity out there that can surface and bring to market things that would never come out of a corporately designed adventure or source book or something like that, whether that's from Paizo or from WotC or even from Chaosium. There's a lot of independence of spirit and vision that I think the OSR brings to the table, which is why I think it has. There's so much, like you were talking a little bit earlier about sort of the generational, not really conflict, but sort of generational visions differing from generation to generation, and I think the OSR really embodies that, and it's really important to the long-term viability of the RPG hobby and in industry. If all we ever had for the RPG ness of everything was Greyhawk or the Forgotten Realms or D&D, then it would eventually die out in the same way that model railroading has died out. People would age out of it as an interest and it would fade away. And that's not to say that model railroading doesn't have cool things going on and stuff too. But I think that vitality and that vibrancy that comes from independent creators being able to share and put into the market their ideas of what is cool, and whether that's an adventure or a rule set or a mashup genre or something kind of brand new and innovative that's not been done before at all. I think the OSR is really important for that point of view.
Okay.
So, yeah,
much more than fair. So, the way you had described OSRIC to me, in a lot of cases, when people do a retro clone, they'll try to keep the majority of the original game mechanics, but they'll quote unquote clean some stuff up. They may add some new mechanics, new classes, that sort of thing. From what I understand, OSRIC is almost a reprint of what's legally available under the OGL, but organized in a way that you get it all in one book, all three books, the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual, but it's also organized in a way that makes things easier to find. And it's laid out differently, because one of the complaints that is justified. Now, I like AD&D. I'm not down on AD&D, but if you look through all the books, sometimes it can be hard to find stuff. And sometimes there's even rules that seem to contradict each other. So
there's definitely rules that contradict each other. Yeah.
Right.
Is magical armor weightless or not?
Right.
Do magic swords glow only, or do magic maces glow?
Right.
Lots of things like that inside AD&D. Yeah.
So OSRIC is, if somebody's big on AD&D, OSRIC is just a very handy 1-volume, easy to find stuff, laid out well, basically version of AD&D.
It is, and a lot of people really like that. The fact that it's organized, in a kind of more editorially structured manner. And, that we have the benefit of the people who worked on OSRIC, having, at the time we were doing it, 30 years plus of gaming experience. We have the advantage of hindsight for knowing where all the pitfalls were with how AD&D was structured and organized and presented to be able to try to improve that. And then the other second big piece is that people talk a lot about Gary Gygax's voice in the AD&D books, and some people like that a lot, and some people don't. And OSRIC obviously can't reproduce that voice since Gary wasn't here to write it. But so some people find that a little more accessible as well, since it's written with a more maybe contemporary voice.
Yeah, it's. I like the book. I own copies of the originals, both in PDF and hard copy of Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide. But this, especially for the price, $26, whatever and you can't beat this. I mean, if you're playing AD&D, or if you just want to take a traipse, if you will, if you want to frolic in the AD&D rules, which I would argue, in a lot of ways, AD&D is more foundational to the hobby than the stuff that came before it. Because when D&D exploded, a lot of people were playing AD&D.
It's true. Yep.
So, just from that standpoint, but if you're playing AD&D at all, this is such a wonderful reference to have, because everything's right here in one book, and
it's also a great tool if somebody wants to try AD&D out for a small campaign, or run a classic adventure like Saltmarsh, or like the Temple of Elemental Evil, or the Giants and Drow modules, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And just do that as the next game version to try. OSRIC's a great way to be able to do that, and to do it affordably in a way that's not going to break the bank for anybody, dungeon master or players.
Yeah, I think the first time you told me what, I was like, yeah, how much does that cost? I was expecting to say like $50, $60, $70, and you're like $26. I was like, what? So, yeah, and there is a business side to Black Blade Publishing. So, it's like you said, you're doing it for the community at that price. So, and then also the legal options to allow people to publish stuff for AD&D. So I would argue that Black Blade, between the ancillary, is that right? The historical materials you publish, and that, you were there for Swords and Wizardry, you were involved with OSRIC, you're publishing John Eric Holmes fiction, you're doing design zines, you're doing zines.
We publish graph and hex paper, so
right.
Some of the things that we try to do both in OSRIC and with specifically like Black Blade with the hex paper and graph paper is we try to give people the tools to be creative and to build their own stuff. And it's kind of that teach someone to fish kind of approach.
Right.
We want to let people help people to be as creative as they can be with by providing these different toolkits to do that.
Right. So yeah, and you can get modules, like you said, more stuff that you might not find somewhere else. Modules for OSR games. When you say you reprint RJK1, Cairn of the Skeleton King, I'm assuming that's by Kuntz, right? Robert J. Kuntz 1, Cairn of the Skeleton King.
It is, yeah. So I worked with Rob when he was founding Pied Piper Publishing, and we published a number of adventures over the 3 or 4 years or so that he was publishing actively as Pied Piper. And then he kind of shifted his publishing work and approach. And we then began doing reprints of those after he had sold sold through this stock originally from his initial Pied Piper version. So Karen of the Skeleton King was the first adventure he published in 2007, which was sort of back in the early days or the proto days of the OSR, and it was published under his own Creations Unlimited house rules. So it kind of had that same language that you would see in an old Rolaids module or Judges Guild module, where it was armor type and blah blah blah. And then when we reprinted that in 2014, we normalized that and standardized that using the OGL and OSRIC to do that. So it made that more consistent and again, more accessible, because you don't have to think about, oh, what does that mean as you're going through it.
So anytime I have somebody on the show that runs a business, a creative business, or a business that's supporting creative stuff, like, they're doing their own games or comic books or video games or whatever, I like to spend a moment and explore the business side to open people's eyes of what it's like to jump in on the business side of a hobby. So everything that I see on Black Blade, the way you describe it, the products that I see, this to me, is you and is it Josh Hirschberger? John Hirschberger?
John Hirschberger, yeah.
John Hirschberger, who I know I've met him as well. This just screams labor of love to me. So, I'm not trying to get into your financials because that's not my business. But I would guess that you and John are not getting rich off Black Blade. It's a labor of love. But at the same time, there are financial realities to running a business. So I hope that you're, at least covering the bases, if not, I guess what I'm trying to ask is it, is the labor of love the effort you put into it, or are you at least, getting something out of it, or is it purely just, hey, we want to do this for the community?
Well, it's both. It's very much a labor of love. So Black Blade is a hobby business for us. It's not a day job for either of us, and it certainly doesn't pay us back the time and effort we put into it, except through, sort of those non-fiscal rewards that you get from, being able to see all the cool stuff that you can bring to people, and hearing somebody say, you recommended one of Anthony Husso's adventures to me at GaryCon, and I ran it recently and it was great, at the table, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, your booth is definitely my favorite at North Texas. It's always got so much cool stuff. I mean, there's other good booths and vendors as well, but yours is like I could just browse it forever because you've got so much cool stuff out. Like you said, you got historical resources, you got game resources, you got modules, you got this, you got maps, you got all this cool stuff. So
yeah, John O'Neill at Blackgate Magazine did a wonderful profile of our booth several years ago from GaryCon. Cool. And he said it was like walking into a sort of a classic store or at a convention in 1979 or something like that. I can send you the link to that later too.
Yeah, no, that's a good way. I would describe it as like, if you ever go to, it's one of those experiences, like if you ever go to a big city that has a lot of the stores that you wouldn't get into a smaller city. And like I'm thinking of London because I used to live in England when I was in the Air Force, so I'd get to London a lot. And I would pop into these little, what's this doorway? And I'd find these cool little shops that, like, whoa, that's what it reminds me of. Like it's just a delight, of stuff that you're not just going to find at your average game store.
And we intentionally curate that. There's people whose works we carry now that we didn't carry several years ago. And that's part of that. Sometimes, their priorities shift and they're not active anymore. Some of that is the business back end side where, this product was cool, but it wasn't selling very well. So we eventually phase it out. We do a lot of analysis and metrics around what's selling and not selling. And that helps, kind of make the labor of love side of it a little less burdensome when you're carrying stock. around.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Yeah, you've got to load all that stuff in and load it back out. So I was going to ask, I found a couple of different. So when I was looking for Black Blade online, okay, I found the two main things I found. Like if I want to direct people to Black Blade that are listening to this podcast, it looks like your store is at Noble Knight Games. Is that correct?
So Noble Knight does carry some of our stock. We used to have a regular website for Black Blade Publishing at black-blade-publishing.com, but that's defunct at this point. So we are using our Facebook as the front and center for Black Blade. So that's just facebook.com/Black Blade Publishing, all is one word. And there are, in addition, there's some OSRIC related resources that are available independent of Black Blade. So there's the OSRICRPG.com site, which is sort of a cross publisher platform for OSRIC. And then there's the OSRIC Wiki, which takes and makes all of the OSRIC rule set, as well as the expansion for OSRIC, which has been in the works for over 10 years at Knights and Knaves Ale House, which is called Dangerous Dungeons, as sort of an homage to Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions novels. But that's all available out on the OSRIC Wiki. And I'll put that in the chat for you as well. So OSRIC isn't only by any means something that Black Blade is involved with. Lots of other publishers like Expeditious Retreat Games, who've published over 40 modules and 2 monster manuals for OSRIC. So they're there. Usherwood Publishing, who was Jim Cramer's imprint while he was still with us, had a bunch of adventures and players guides, and they published the small, kind of portable A5 sized OSRIC edition, among other things. So there's a lot of folks out there still supporting OSRIC. It's by no means a Black Blade exclusive thing.
Oh, that's great to know. And I mean, I'd imagine that's what you would hope, right? You want it to be.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Part of why we'd built OSRIC in the first place was that we wanted AD&D to survive us as a generation. Right. So,
right. Yeah, I love that aspect of it, that it's that, you're trying to put you're not just trying to do, well, this is Black Blade's OSR game, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's publishing companies out there like, this is our version of OSR BX or whatever. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Your approach is, it's like you're not trying to plant a flag for Black Blade. You're trying to do something for the overall OSR and AD&D community. And I think that's wonderful. So, and if you sell some books at the same time, great, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I do recommend anybody who's even mildly interested in AD&D or that's still playing AD&D to pick this volume up. Like I said, $26, you get everything in one volume that you need to run basically AD&D. So
yeah, now as a caveat for that, OSRIC is also available through lulu.com, through print on demand. And our edition is printed through a better printer with higher quality paper. It's the same price point as the Lulu version. But if you're not located in the United States and you want to order OSRIC, Lulu's probably a better option when you look at how much shipping has increased over the years.
Oh, right,
so to ship a copy of OSRIC, which weighs like 3 pounds, overseas is like $50 or $60 these days.
Shipping is
so ordering it through Lulu, if you're in the UK or if you're in in Europe or somewhere else in Asia, it's probably cheaper because Lulu has local printers there that you don't have the exorbitant shipping fees to ship from the United States to wherever you might be.
All right. Well, you've been wonderful with your time, but I'm going to go ahead and start drawing us to a close. There's so much more we could talk about. I wish people could see and go to the show notes at shaneplays.com and see all this career highlights that Allan sent me. I mean, there's so much more we could be talking about here.
And I'm happy to continue the conversation as we talked about earlier, as time and schedules align. So
I absolutely want to do a follow-up show on Greyhawk if you're up to that.
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, we could also, we could probably do a separate podcast on John Eric Harp's, Boinger and Zareth stories. I'm not familiar with them. So, but I know that, we know him as Holmes Basic, but he's got a whole, bibliography of fiction that he wrote. So, so that would be interested. You've worked with Paul Stormberg, you've worked with, Rob Kuntz. There's a lot here that we could talk about. So your history, some of these conventions you've gone to, you went to Gary Con number 0, you went to Gen Con, Origins number 1. You just
no, I wasn't at Origins number 1.
Were you not?
No. So that was my first Origins.
Oh, you were at Origins 1980. Okay,
right.
Yeah,
so Origins number 1 was in 1975, and that's when they ran the 2 Mahars. In 1975, I was still, 5-6 years old at that point. So
okay.
I was not traveling to Baltimore for that.
Well, you did go to Dragon Con number 1.
I did go to Dragon Con.
Gary Con number
That's
0.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, you've been there. You met Michael Moorcock, for goodness sakes, who I just found out a few years ago. Michael Moorcock's also like the lead singer for like a rock band. That guy's out there doing crazy stuff. So he
has his own band called the Deep Fix. And then he also sang and did entire albums with Hawkwind, who are a British space rock band. And he also worked with Blue Oyster Cult. More.
And the reason I found out that he was in a band was I was reading Alan Moore's The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and Alan Moore will reference him, and I think Kevin O'Neill does the art. They have Easter eggs out the wazoo. It's every panel has stuff in there, and one of them is he's got Michael Moorcock, fronting the band, and I was like, what's that about? And I went and looked it up and learned about his
Hawkwind's some awesome stuff. I could wax philosophically about the awesomeness of Hawkwind, for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to, before I move us on, is there anything else you want to mention about the OSR, OSRIC, AD&D, Black Blade, gaming in general? Any shout outs, anything you want to do before I move us on?
So I guess there's just a couple other short things. The OSR, you were talking about the importance of zines. So the OSR has sort of seen a proliferation of zines over the course of the last few years, in particular with the Kickstarter focus around the zine projects that get done in every February or March each year. But before all of those were there, at the beginnings of the OSR, there was Fight On magazine. And Fight On comes as a title from the one of the last images inside the OD&D set, shows a fighter holding the sword up, Fight On. And Fight On has been on hiatus for a number of years, but will be coming back with issue number, I think it's 15 or maybe it's 16, very soon. So the editor's been working over on the ODD 74 boards to bring the newest issue to bear. And I think, if I'm remembering right, that one's focused on Holmes thematically. So that's fun. And it's I think that's part of the fun side of being involved in the community and the hobby too, is you can see some of the, sometimes real life gets in the way and people are on hiatus for a while, or they stop publishing for a while. And then, when they get a chance, they come back. And with the editors there coming back into the fold, Fight On will live and breathe again. And there's already plans for an issue after this one. So that's a lot of fun.
Who's gonna publish that? Do you know?
So that'll be published through Fight On magazine. They're their own thing.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
I think it's, let me look and see and make sure. I think it's fightonmagazine.com. If I'm,
Yeah, these
yep,
little
it
zines
is.
are cool. Like Planet X Games is doing some cool zines, and there's a pretty neat zine community out there, like you're saying. And I've just kind of discovering Planet X Games just put out a zine called Big Eye Chungus, and it's about it's full about basically how to handle an intellectually property protected creature that is it's a big ball with a bunch of eyes on it. But it's the whole zine is about how to run those. It's really neat.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Yeah, I'm going to link to Fight On Magazine here.
So Fight On's kind of coming back, so that old Lovecraft adage, that is not what dead, which can eternal die,
Right.
but with strange aeons, even death may die. So Fight On's coming back from the dead. And Matt Finch has talked a little bit about kind of resuscitating Knockspell, which was the sort of the peer magazine to Fight On as well, which hasn't had a new issue in Knockspell's case since about 2011 or so. So.
Oh. Well, that reminds me. Earlier when you were talking about Matt, we were talking about Swords and Wizardry, and we were also talking about OSRIC, and we were talking about We were talking about Matthew Finch. So I was going to throw that note out there. It's an audio footnote, but I'll do it now since it came back up. So, is there any other shout outs or anything?
No, I think that's about it.
Right.
I'd love to come back. Had a great time chatting with you. I'd
love to have you back on. Definitely love to have you on to talk about Greyhawk and other things. A little shout out I want to do. The Save for Half podcast recently did an episode talking about, it's kind of like in this, talking about OSRIC where everything's reorganized and it's all in one volume. Somebody named Greyharp, evidently within the past couple of years, they took all of the 3 books of OD&D and put it into one volume and laid it out so that it makes more sense editorially. And the halflings from the Save for Half were very impressed with that. So I don't know anything about it other than I haven't even seen it myself. It's not for sale or anything like that. It's, nobody's not trying to, they just did it as their own personal labor. They just took
hobby project.
Hobby project. They took the original 3 books of OD&D and they put it together into one. Evidently it's well laid out, and even people like Jim Wampler, who's been around, in the hobby for a long time, when he read OD&D in one volume laid out editorially like Greyharp did it gave him a different impression of OD&D.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, if we thought AD&D was sort of not organized well, OD&D really raises the bar on that.
Yeah, but I think you have to do your own sleuthing if you want to find it. I don't think there's like one easy place to go find it, right? But that
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, there's a single volume of OD&D out there by Greyharp. So
yeah, and there have been other fan productions done like that over the years. I've seen some folks who did a OD&D compilation like that, but they replaced all of OD&D's original, let's say, quaint artwork for the most part with Frazetta work.
Wow! Yeah, see, that would give you a completely different atmosphere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to close with a couple of things here. One, when it comes to OSR, I got to ask you. Okay, you got Thunderdome, right? 2 enter, 1 leave, right? Remember Thunderdome for Mad Max?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Okay, cage match. Strongheart and Warduke go in. Who's leaving?
My dark heart for Warduke will put the sword in the heart of the paladin any day of the week. So, and I have a few, speaking of other hobby projects, I have a few very fun miniatures that were done for Warduke that have come out from miniature producers over the last couple of years.
There is so much love for Warduke out there. I started, there's a hashtag.
He got incorporated into Greyhawk too.
Yeah, no, he's just there's a hashtag. I don't know who started it. The person I think of associated with it is Levi Combs from Planet X Games. But I've started doing it too, and others. Every Wednesday, you hashtag Warduke Wednesday, and you post something related to Warduke.
Oh, that's fun.
I post this stuff out, and I share it around on Facebook and everything. The love for Warduke is strong, and there's been some pretty amazing. I see some custom miniatures of Warduke that are pretty great. I see some cosplay of Wardukes that's pretty great. I didn't realize how deep the Warduke rabbit hole went until I started doing Warduke Wednesday. So
I bet.
Yeah, it's pretty.
We know
great.
gamers, we love to obsess. So
yeah, no, I love Warduke. Yeah, he's he's a bad guy, but he's a fun bad guy.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah. So I've got the Funko. I've got the Warduke Funko, and I've also got there's like a premium. I think it's NECA NECA that does the action figures that are like, collectible. And I pre-ordered Warduke forever ago. I'm waiting for it to come in. So, all right. Okay. So Warduke drops Strongheart like a bad habit.
That's right.
All right. And I got to ask you I always do the bad joke of the week. Even though the podcast isn't weekly, I call it the bad joke of the week. I finish every podcast with a bad joke, and it's supposed to be bad. So the visceral, awful, I can't believe that just happened to me reaction is accurate. Okay. So here's the bad joke. Since we're in October now, I picked one kind of Halloweenish. Here we go, Allan.
All right.
A skeleton walks into a bar. Bartender says, "What do you have?" Skeleton says, "I'll take a beer and a mop."
Nice.
You're supposed to sort of groan as if you got attacked with a psionic assault. But
yeah, well, so one of the fun things about AD&D and Greyhawk in particular is the puns that are scattered throughout from Gary and Rob, and I've heard worse groaners than that. Believe me.
All right. Well, here we go. All right. Because you said nice, you didn't groan in pain. Why don't vampires use whiteout when riding?
I don't know, Shane. Why don't they?
They prefer typos.
Oh, that's a good one.
There we go. There we go. That's what I wanted right there.
That's a good one.
All right, what do you call a vampire with insomnia?
What?
Dust.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so there we go. All right, we'll end there.
I think the typo is the best one.
Yeah, the typo is the best one. Yeah. Well, the cheesiest one I have is what happens when a vampire uploads a copyrighted video to YouTube?
What?
Account suspended.
Ooh. You gotta say that with the Count's voice from Sesame Street.
Account suspended.
That's a good one too.
All right, I'm gonna wrap us up, folks. We've been talking with Allan T. Grohe Jr., aka Allan Grohe, aka Allan, aka Grow Dog. We've been talking about just all kinds of cool RPG stuff. We've been talking about the OSR. We've been talking about OSRIC, which is a AD&D OSR retro clone. Really just a wonderful one-volume organization of the AD&D rules. Easy to find stuff. We've been talking about Black Blade Publishing. We've been talking about a lot of other really cool stuff. So go to the show notes, check out OSRIC, check out Black Blade Publishing, and all the other cool links that Allan's been sending me to add to the show notes. And check out, I'm gonna put in the show notes his biography and the career highlights he sent me. It's just really cool stuff. And we'll have you back on the show again in the future, Allan, to talk about Greyhawk and maybe some other things. So tell Henry that
I had a great time, and I will be happy to come back and chat some more.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I met you at North Texas. You're one of my favorite people to see there. Plus your booth. So I'm so wonderful, or not so wonderful. I'm so glad that we stuck with it and made sure that a show happened. All right, Allan, well, take care. Thanks again for your time, and I will definitely let you know when the show drops.
That sounds great. Thanks, Shane.
All right.
And thanks, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I was going to say, everybody else, thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.